Broken rail roller coaster is arguably the most apt description for a tilt coaster out there. It is also the name of Suzhou Amusement Land Force World's tilt coaster. Even though it is overshadowed by Beyond the Cloud, this is still a solid ride that is definitely worth checking out. I will explain why in this review. In 2002, Gravity Max was built at Discovery World as the first ever tilt coaster. What happens is that at the top of the lift hill, you go onto a portion of track which disconnects from the lift hill and tilts straight down where it reconnects with the vertical section of track before releasing the train. It instantly became one of the most well-known rides of all time for the gimmick alone, featuring in numerous top 10 most insane rides lists. Despite the internet fame, no more Vekoma tilt coasters opened until just recently, when Siren's Curse was built at Cedar Point. In 2016, Jinma Rides, who were back then known as Golden Horse, created their own version of a tilt coaster called a Broken Rail Coaster. The first installation was Battle of Jungle King at Hefei Sunak Land. It actually was a dueling tilt coaster with two tilt tracks facing each other. One obvious difference it had with the Vekoma model was that the tilt was not fully vertical. Reviews were mostly negative as the ride was both rough and boring. 2 years later, Broken Rail Roller Coaster at Great Xingdong Tourist World, which had a standard layout, opened. Unlike Battle of Jungle King, there was only one track and it had 5 inversions following the tilt. Many coaster enthusiasts noticed that this layout looked far better than the previous iteration with much better elements and pacing. All subsequent Jinma tilt coasters were clones of that, including the subject of this video. The tilt coaster at Suzhou Amusement Land Forest World actually opened with the park in 2020. The park had previously opened in 1997 as just Suzhou Amusement Land, and it operated for 2 decades before it closed in 2017. 3 years later, the park reopened with a slightly different name and location with a brand new tilt coaster and spinning coaster. Evidently, it was a success, as in 2022, the park built Beyond the Cloud. Back to Broken Rail Roller Coaster, it has a very inconspicuous entrance. If you couldn't read Chinese or didn't remember the name of the ride in Chinese, you would be forgiven for completely missing it. There's a cafe that does not really stand out much, and tucked away to the side of the building is the ride's entrance. However, the coaster itself has a very prominent presence in the park as they try to display the tilt track as much as possible. Queue times for Broken Rail Roller Coaster were different on my 2 visits. When I first went there in the summer, the wait time was 45 minutes. Though Beyond the Cloud was closed that time, so the reduced capacity may have contributed to longer queues elsewhere. On my second visit in the winter, the ride was a complete walk-on. Even then, I still needed to wait 5 to 10 minutes as the operators were quite slow and were in no hurry whatsoever. They also only ran 1 train both times, but at least that train has 6 cars with 2 rows of 2 for a total capacity of 24 riders, which is not bad. The ride also has a vest restraint which looks a lot like the B&M one. I think this is quite comfortable, as once the vest locks in place it won't tighten more. It also means headbanging is impossible, not that it would be a problem on this ride anyway. Both the track work and profiling are extremely smooth. So what is my favorite seat on this ride? I think the front and back are roughly equally good. In the back, the drop lasts a bit longer, but in the front, the rest of the layout has slightly better forces and you get better visuals and some extra wind in your face. Though I feel that since the tilt is a very rare element, if you only get one ride, you should go for the back in order to maximize the tilt and the following drop. Once the ride dispatches, you go into a turn out of the station before climbing the lift hill. At the top, you go around another turn before slowly going onto the tilt track. In front, you can see the track just end, and it is honestly quite freaky, inching closer and closer to the edge. After coming to a stop, you must wait a little as the safety systems engage before you start tipping forward. For a few agonizing seconds, the track is disconnected, and you will be praying you don't fall to your death. Once the tilt track reconnects with the drop, you will wait another short while as all the safety systems disengage before it releases you and you drop. Because the tilt isn't fully vertical and is instead angled at about 70 to 80 degrees, there is no airtime. However, the suddenness of the plunge means you get a strong stomach-dropping feeling. As you fall from a higher height in the back, it lasts a bit longer there, though it is still quite good up front. After a decently forceful valley, you go into a sidewinder. In front, you are pushed up the element, resulting in very strong and sudden positive Gs. The twist is dull though, as you will not get a lot of hang time or whip. That is followed by a cobra roll. In front, you once again get strong positive Gs as you are shoved up the element, and the twists at the top are also quite uneventful. Then the back gets yanked down the exit, giving them their first taste of really strong positive Gs. That is followed by a helix. The first portion, which goes upwards, gives good positive Gs. Then, at the top, as you level off, the turn gets a lot wider and the banking also decreases. On my summer rides, this part actually gave some laterals, while that wasn't the case in my winter rides. Then, that transitions into a downward helix, which once again provides a strong dose of positive Gs for everybody. Then you go into a corkscrew. It gives some nice hang time, and though the profiling may appear a bit wonky when you watch a POV, it is actually very smooth. After that, there is an inline twist. This once again has some great hang time. That is followed by one last turn which has some decent positive Gs before you hit the final brake run and return to the station, ending the 774 meter or 2,538 foot long coaster. That figure, by the way, is not listed on RCDB. I got it directly from Jinma Ride's own website. Overall, Broken Rail Roller Coaster is a solid ride. Although it is undeniably gimmicky, it still has a complete layout after the drop, which cannot be said for earlier tilt coasters. I like the forceful inversions at the beginning, which kind of feels like a B&M looper. Then, the last two inversions also give back-to-back moments of hang time, which is a lot of fun. Pacing is certainly not one of its issues. The coaster is also very smooth, as the profiling is good and there is no rattle whatsoever. As Vekoma has produced more tilt coasters in recent years, it's fair to wonder how many more Jinma will build in the future. I do think Jinma might be able to continue building tilt coasters. In fact, another standard layout tilt coaster opened in 2025. Given their attempts to break into the Western markets in recent years, I would also not be surprised if they built one there if the political climate allows. So what would I rate Broken Rail Roller Coaster? I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. This is actually a really fun ride. Jinma defied their negative reputation amongst coaster enthusiasts and created a ride that was actually enjoyable. The first tilt coaster they made looked rough and boring, but they improved the design on their second attempt. And prior to the opening of the new Vekoma tilt coasters just last year, this was arguably the best tilt coaster on the planet. With all that said, what are your thoughts on Broken Rail Roller Coaster? Have you been on it or any other Jinma tilt coasters? Was it a good ride? Did you enjoy the tilt track? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this coaster review, and I will be very grateful if you leave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, as more videos will be coming soon. Thanks for watching.